Cool. Okay, let's watch this video about the party hats. Let's do it.
This paper crown is completely useless, but cost 6,000 US dollars and was 42,000 a few years ago. This is the story of RuneScape's party hats and how they went from holiday trash to the most coveted items in the game. Our story starts in October of 2001. RuneScape's co-founders and Jagex owners, the Gower brothers, wanted to do something special to celebrate Halloween. They decided that on October 31st, they would scatter pumpkins all across the game world. Andrew Gower could also be found in Falador dropping pumpkins at random during this time. Players who found them could pick them up, trade them with their friends, and even eat them. Most players chose to eat the pumpkins as they would heal 14 hit points, 2 more.
I always think it's like really interesting looking back at where all these events kind of came from. Like there's so many things that are absolutely core memories in RuneScape, and like now pumpkins show up in every single Halloween event and you always get them and they heal the same amount that they used to. And I just think that that's like a really unique thing that RuneScape does, where like the nostalgia in RuneScape is so much stronger than in the majority of other games. I feel like maybe I'm wrong about that, but I feel like that they really nurse that nostalgia super, super hard, and it's such a core fundamental part of why we still play RuneScape. Not that that's the only reason, but there's definitely this like world of it, you know what I mean?
More than lobsters, which were fairly expensive at the time. However, many players ignored the pumpkins, dropped them a few days after Halloween, or just slowly ate all of them. With bank space limited to just 48 items, few players bothered to hold on to any. Both the players and the Gowers had no idea that pumpkins would one day be worth $140 each. Pumpkins were RuneScape's first ever limited time drop.
I love that we're now converting RuneScape items into dollar amounts. That like USD is such a like RuneScape items and RuneScape currency is the original cryptocurrency for real. Like it has held value just extremely well, dude. The items are to have a party hat in RuneScape 3 right now, dude. You're sitting on like a huge down payment on a house.
After October 31st, pumpkins would never be spawned again. So as RuneScape took off in popularity, their price would seemingly go nowhere but up. But for now, they were virtually worthless, even considered junk by some. Regardless, players were happy with the event. It was a fun, festive way to celebrate Halloween in RuneScape. So for Christmas, Jagex decided to do another limited time drop. On Christmas Eve, when players logged in, they'd be greeted with rainbow flashing text.
Yeah, dude, I had a friend who sold gear in Fallout 76 and made a tidy profit off of it for a long time. Real world trading is such a gray area for me. Like I don't completely hate real world trading. I think that it devalues some of like the game stuff that you can get for sure, but like good for the people who do it and make money off of it. Like good for you for finding a way to monetize your video game time, you know? Like excellent work, my guy.
That said Merry Christmas. And all around them on the floor were a new item called Christmas crackers.
Dude.
Players who picked them up could use them on another player to crack them open. One player would receive a random item, while the other would receive a party hat, which they would promptly throw in the garbage. At the time, party hats were worthless junk.
Dude,
you really wanted to be the player that got the random item out of the cracker, because it could be anything from coal to the valuable rune plate body. Party hats provide no benefit to your character when worn, and again, with bank space being so limited, nobody wanted to waste 6 slots on silly paper hats. As you know, those players would be making a huge mistake, but they wouldn't know it for a while. Sort of like how you don't know about Watcher of Realms, a next-gen fantasy RPG available on mobile and PC. So,
Do you guys think that the reason that I don't get advertisements like to go onto this channel is because I'm not good at segues? I mean, let's like get away from the fact that I don't get any views on my videos, but like, do you think like the segue skills of some of these dudes are so good? He made such a penny off this 93K, dude. Like this dude probably made like $1,800 to like $3,600, dude.
Let's talk about it. They're currently hosting a unique samurai-themed event. As part of this event, a new limited-time hero, Kagiri,
I'm not advertiser-friendly, dude,
is here to unleash his vengeance.
Oh no!
He was once a guardian of sacred vows,
How
but
will I ever buy a
betrayal has
Tesla?
transformed him into the undying avenger he is today. Kagiri also arrives with a brand new skin, the Shorn Spirit. Dive into the Blackblade Chronicles to earn Kagiri's exclusive
Is
artifact,
Asmon like completely
a unique
banned?
avatar border, and and
I thought he
tons
came
of
back.
other rewards. There's also a whole variety of events like 7-day sign-in, fishing event, and matchup master that lets you obtain rewards easily. Alongside Kagiri, we also welcome Zarus, an explosive AoE burst mage who is ready to obliterate your enemies. Watcher of Realms actually has over 200 heroes to summon, all of which have their own unique characteristics and captivating backstories.
Damn,
There's a
30
vast
days,
world to
holy
explore
cow.
with a rich storyline, breathtaking visuals, and 360-degree.
There's a couple of Teslas around. Guys, I have something to admit. I downloaded one of these random phone games today. I saw an Instagram ad for it, and it caught me, and it looked fun, so I downloaded one of these like random phone games, and it has the craziest name. It's called Wiz Daphne. I think it's like actually called like Wizardry something Daphne or something, but it's like a dungeon crawling game that looks like this. And I don't know, dude, the aesthetics just caught me, and I was like, all right, let's go for it. It's pretty cool. I can't lie. I'm pretty sure it's Chinese spyware, but you know.
Real-time combat where you control the battle.
Nah, dog, it's so brutalistic. Like it looks like Berserk or something. Like the monsters are like these gorish, disgusting creatures. It's very different for sure. There are anime girls in it, but that's not why I downloaded it. No worries.
Battlefield. You can also test your skills in thrilling game modes, challenge powerful bosses in PvE, or join a guild and engage in intense GVG battle.
During his ad, I segued to my ad. And I was like, Wizardry Daphne is a great game that you can play for free. Collect all of the different characters.
Where you'll
What's up,
defend
Luis?
your
How you doing?
stronghold and conquer enemy bases. It's the perfect time to dive in. So click the link in the description or scan the QR code to download Watcher of Realms for free on PC, Android, and iOS, and experience
Scan
the
his
way
code,
of
guys.
the samurai.
Scan his
the
code.
Christmas event was another
Make these
success,
people like me.
and the Gower brothers wanted to continue the trend of dropping limited time items on holidays.
Let's do it.
On March 31st, 2002, they would drop Easter eggs to celebrate, well, the 2-year anniversary of The Matrix, of course. This time, more players held on to them than previous
Hell yeah,
drops
dude.
because the bank could now hold 96 items, or 144
Could you
if
stack
you paid for
items back
membership.
then?
Like pumpkins, they weren't entirely useless, as they healed 11 hit points. And who would say no to free food when you have so much space for it? On October 31st, 2002, Jagex would drop 3 different colored Halloween masks
Oh, yeah, do
to
the Halloween
celebrate the
masks.
holiday. This
So ugly
event
back
was
then.
functionally the same as previous ones, but players' attitudes towards it were very different. By now, most of the player base had realized that old holiday items wouldn't be re-releasing, since pumpkins didn't return for Halloween. So they would hoard these new masks in hopes of getting rich off of them in the future. Over the last few months, party hats and Christmas crackers had risen in value by a fair amount. Generally, they were all selling for around 100,000 to 200,000 gold. Unlike
That's a lot of money
pumpkins
back
and
then.
Easter eggs, party hats were a wearable sign of
This is 2001, dude. Taco Bell was 20 cents, you know? Like you could get a hamburger for a nickel. A 200,000 gold is insane.
wealth that could be shown off. So there was a fair amount of demand for them, especially since the player base had grown a lot since their release. There were thousands of players who weren't playing when party hats released that now wanted them.
Yep.
Now, Jagex didn't like
That's a
that
crown,
holiday
dude.
events had turned into a time of hoarding wealth. So, on December 25th, 2002, along with dropping Santa hats for Christmas, they would ask players to be generous with them. If you managed to get more than
You could buy so many girlfriends if you had a party hat on, dude. You could buy so many girlfriends.
one, then please consider giving them to your friends as Christmas presents. Of course, you can sell them, but that's not really the spirit of Christmas. As you might have expected, players didn't listen. The only thing rarer than a limited time holiday item was a player willing to give one out for free. Jagex knew they needed to make a change to how these drops worked. On April 20th, 2003, Jagex would drop bunny ears all over Runescape. The smell of money was in the air, and players logged in excited to stock up on an item that would surely make them rich in a few years. They'd pick up their first pair, but when they went to pick up a second, they'd receive a message in their chat box. You don't need another set of bunny ears, you only have one head. Not only had Jagex limited each player to only
Told them, dude. This is the downfall of RuneScape, in my opinion. This is the beginning of the end for this game, dude. When they stopped allowing us to like hoard valuable items when other people can't get them, you know? It was the bunny ears, dude. That was the end. I couldn't buy a scythe, and that's not fair.
Owning one pair of
2
ears,
Yeah,
they
I
were
got a
also
second hand, boy.
untradeable, meaning they were impossible to buy and sell. Although this would lead to some complaints, it solved the problem of players hoarding the item
Women were thick back in RuneScape Classic, dude.
and still let them have a bit of fun. On October 31st, 2003, the holiday drops would continue with the Scythe,
Yep.
an item that you could once again only own one of and not trade. But this time, there were a lot more complaints. Scythes were dropped at times when most of the United States was still asleep. Since they couldn't be traded, that meant most players had missed out on scythes
Oh,
forever.
man, that sucks.
But Andrew Gower, for the first time ever, gave in to the complaints and would drop scythes again on November 2nd at more US-friendly times.
Good for him.
In the background, past holiday items had continued to rise at an astounding pace. Christmas crackers were now worth a shocking 20 million gold, and party hats sold for 4 to 18 million depending on the color. Every other rare item was still less than a million though, as they either couldn't be worn and shown off or had been hoarded. Party hats were seemingly going nowhere but up, but they were about to lose all of their value. In November of 2003, a player named 6 Feet Under was attempting to find a way to trade scythes using a RuneScape cheating program called AutoRune.
Dude, I remember
Ultimately,
that.
he was unsuccessful, but in the process, accidentally discovered a glitch that would allow him to make just about any item in the game out of thin air as many times
So many people got banned over this.
as he wanted. He shared this glitch with a few friends, and just hours later, they had created and dropped thousands of Christmas crackers.
Yeah, I don't know if this happens in other games. Like, I know that there are players that are really well known in other games. Like, I know in Maple Story, like Tiger Fangblade, those people were really, really popular. And there's like a whole video that I want to watch some point about like Maple Story celebrities. And I know that like in World of Warcraft, they had Athene, right? Like he was a really, really big deal. I know that Asmon, but Asmon wasn't famous in Asmon wasn't famous in World of Warcraft for being in World of Warcraft. Asmon became famous afterwards. That one doesn't count in my opinion. Like Zezima is a character that we all know, and it's because of his time in RuneScape. And I think that that's such an interesting thing. Like RuneScape has this kind of culture of being a second world that we live in, whereas other games are much more like games, you know? It's just a whole different thing.
And party hats. Jagex was furious and banned the accounts of everyone involved and attempted to remove any cheated in items from the game, but a lot of them slipped through the cracks. Overnight, party hats and Christmas crackers would plummet in value to near worthless. When the dust settled a few days later, they bounced back to around 2 to 6 million GP each, but the glitch had changed their rarity forever. The purple party hat was previously the most expensive party hat, as it had the lowest pull rate from Christmas crackers. But because the glitchers created so many, it was now the most common party hat,
Sheesh.
and would be the least expensive one for about the next 2 decades. Instead, the second rarest party hat you could get from crackers, the blue party hat, would now be the most valuable. This is the party hat I'll be putting my main focus on the rest of the video, as I think its price is the most interesting. Other rare items were largely unaffected by this glitch, as glitchers really only went for the most valuable items.
Totally.
However, Andrew's festive mood had been soured, likely due to the duplication
Why did they give him such rockin' tits, dude? What were they doing? Andrew Gower, dude. What was he up to back
glitch
then?
and all the complaints Jagex would get every time they would do a holiday drop. On December 22nd, 2003, he announced that there wasn't going to be a drop on Christmas that year. Instead, the team would focus their efforts on the soon-to-be released RuneScape 2. In the background, party hats would
Classic.
slowly begin to rise again. Most of them recovered to their pre-glitch values by March of 2004.
Nah, dog. Lara Croft for PS1 is like the RuneScape 2 stuff, bro. That's what they changed to. They changed those pointy, like, pyramid boobs. Before that, they were round and supple.
But would crash
This video, I gotta put this on YouTube later. I don't know if I should put this on
again
YouTube.
when RuneScape 2 launched. The game had tons of new content to do, much of which required gold, so players had less of an interest in useless collectibles. But by the fall of 2004, they would begin climbing in price again. This is when a group of merchants would band together to try and influence prices to climb even higher. Merchants are basically players who would buy an item at a lower price from a player and sell it to to someone else at a higher price.
Classic.
Merchants, well, good merchants, were and still are some of the wealthiest players in the game. By buying up a ton of party hats and a bit of social engineering, they were able to increase the price of each party hat by a few million gold. It wasn't a huge success, but proved that market manipulation like this was possible and would lead to more attempts in the future. By December of 2004, the prices of Christmas crackers and most party hats would—
To think that if I could have just been good at RuneScape back then, and like 16 million is not that much gold. Like even back then, I mean, it's a lot back then for sure. But you know, barrows probably didn't exist back then, but some hard barrowsing, you know, like I could do that now. I could have, if I had the skills that I have now in this game, I could have owned a party hat back then, and I could be rich, dude. $36,000 for a party hat nowadays? That's insane. That's insane. Imagine.
would finally recover to their pre-glitch values, but this was short-lived. They would all crash again due to something merchants nicknamed the trust drop. After their first successful merge, they had continued to manipulate the market and believed that prices fell because they had manipulated it too much. Rares had become too valuable and would spend the next few months declining to correct. On the bright side, Jagex would begin giving out holiday items again, but this time they were not only untradeable, but they would be available for 2 weeks instead of 1 day. That way, if you were stuck at family gatherings or church all day on Christmas—
Callum makes a really good point, guys. How much money would it be worth for you to never play RuneScape again? Because I'm thinking in my head, I'm not thinking about selling one party hat to make 36K. I'm thinking about if I had like 20 party hats and I could make like $500,000 off of them in real life. Even if they ban my account, because they might for real world trading like that. It'd be pretty easy to find out who did that. $40? That's how much it would take for you? 40K? $40? Take $50. Dude, why do we play this game? Yeah, dude, 100%. Win-win indeed, man. You could spend your retirement doing something besides playing RuneScape. It could actually be good for you. Yeah, dude, I don't know. There's definitely a number for me, you know? 40K. 40K is not bad, man. Never play RuneScape again? $40,000? I don't know, dude.
You wouldn't miss out. In mid-2005, the price of rare items would absolutely explode upwards. In just 1 month, the Christmas cracker jumped in price from 25 million gold to 85 million, while the blue party hat would jump from 30 to 75. Players attributed this huge jump to a few things. First was the recent release of the Barrows minigame. Barrows introduced 24 new pieces of armor into the game, all of which were going for incredibly high prices the first few weeks. Perhaps the players who got lucky early on traded in their loot for a party hat. Slayer had also been released earlier in 2005, and players were now reaching the later levels, which would unlock new monsters with valuable drops. All at the same time, merchants were also trying to manipulate the price of party hats again. However, I think the most important factor is actually inflation. Just like real life, RuneScape's economy also has inflation. The price of 1 million gold in 2003 on underground markets was around $8 to $10, and by 2005 had lowered to about 5 to 7. More people were playing—
Token, for you the question is more about how much would it cost for you not to play Guild Wars 2 anymore. I would also pay money to not play this game anymore, and I can't help it, dude. It's I just do it. I can't help but be here anymore. I love it. I love RuneScape. I can't stay away from it. Why can't I quit you, RuneScape?
In the game than ever, and as a result, gold was entering the game much faster than previous years. Combine all these factors, and it absolutely makes sense why prices skyrocketed. They would drop quickly in the coming weeks, but they still settled for much higher than before. Around this time, something kinda odd would happen. For the first time, a party hat would be consistently worth more than the Christmas cracker, the blue party hat. This is because it was both one of the most desirable colors and, like I mentioned earlier, the second rarest one to get from crackers. Think of it like how a first edition Charizard sells for more than the packs it comes from. You could get a Charizard by opening a pack, but the odds are low. So
that whole Pokemon cards thing is a scam now. I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but like they have a machine now where they can see all the Pokemon cards inside of them, and they even like reseal Pokemon card packs and everything. Like it's BS now. There's no way to actually get one of these. Like they're all bought up from people and already gone through. It's like not real anymore. It's crazy, dude. The world is changing at too fast of a rate for me. I want to be able to buy old Pokemon cards and have the chance of getting a $24,000 card. It definitely is fraud, but they don't care, dude. You think someone buying packs of Pokemon cards is going to have the ability to sue somebody, dude? Not a chance. Not a chance, dude. Dude, Yu-Gi-Oh's artwork is really good. I love Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I just would never play that game because it's like, it's too much at this point. But like, Yu-Gi-Oh's artwork rocks, dude, for real.
People will just spend more money to get the card they want instead of gambling for it. Throughout the rest of 2005, rares would continue to rise in value to heights never seen before. By the end of the year, the blue party hat was worth a whopping 100 million GP. Again, I'd attribute this to merchants, the rising player base, and inflation.
Not a problem.
But by now, rares were running into a new problem. In the last few years, thousands of them had disappeared from the game forever. Many players had lost their rares by dying while wearing them, getting banned, forgetting their passwords, and even accidentally casting the high alchemy spell on them, which would turn them into 1 GP each. The last one is just tragic, but it did happen. It's part of the reason a little warning screen pops up whenever you try and alch something valuable these days. Throughout 2006, party hats would continue to rise, but there were a number of updates that would disrupt the market. First was the launch of skill capes. Every skill in the game now had a cape that you could only—
It would be so legendary, dude. If you were streaming when you did that, dog, that would be so good. The content would be amazing. That would go viral, dude.
Wear if you were level 99 in that skill. Owning even one of these was a huge flex. People would offload their valuable items to pay for the materials needed to reach 99 in the more expensive skills. Third Age armor would also launch this year. Incredibly rare armor, mainly worn to show that you're wealthy, that could only be earned by completing treasure trails or by buying it from someone else. Both of these updates would cause rares to be a little bumpy in 2006, but nothing could truly stop their rise. By the end of 2007, the minimum price you would be paying for a party hat was 150 million GP for a purple, but the blue party hat was a jaw-dropping 430 million. They would all continue to rise through 2007, and by November of that year, blues were now 550 million gold. But a few updates no one saw coming were about to destroy the party hat market. The duel arena in the last few years had become one of the most popular activities in RuneScape.
Bro, I remember going to the duel arena and getting rotten tomatoes and throwing them at people, and I thought that was the coolest shit that I had ever seen in my life, dude. Like, it just to buy them and just to chuck them at people fighting, that was so rad, bro.
Here, you could fight other players in 1v1 combat for fun or for money. You could wager items or GP before starting a duel, and whoever won would receive both players' wagers. Party hats had become extremely popular items to wager duels with. If you've been playing RuneScape for a while—
That cactus is a middle finger.
Party hats had become extremely popular items to wager duels with. If you've been playing RuneScape for a while, I'm sure you remember seeing videos of these high-stakes duels back in the day. Not only were they exciting to participate in, other players just couldn't look away, especially if it was a Nightmare RH video. Now, the duel arena was also a big source of real-world trading. Many of the biggest duel arena users were buying gold using real money to gamble here. Buying gold is explicitly against the game rules, and Jagex had been trying to stop players from doing it for a while. Many of the websites players bought gold from were stealing players' credit cards, buying membership on a bunch of accounts using those stolen credit cards, and then botting on those accounts to generate more gold that they could then sell. When a player realized their card was stolen, they'd call the credit card company and get their money back. This meant there were a lot of—
This is the whole reason that they got rid of free trade in RuneScape at one point. This is the reason that the game started to have a downfall, is because the credit card— I'm sure he's about to say this, but I'm just going to say it now anyways, because I feel like I'm going to flex my knowledge, dude. The credit card companies were going to stop taking transactions to the game if they couldn't crack down on all of these refunds that people were requesting, if they couldn't crack down on this idea that like these credit card numbers were getting stolen, they were being used to buy accounts for bots, and then people were like charging back all those credit card fees and reporting their credit cards as stolen. And like it wasn't even the fault of Jagex, but they couldn't crack down on this real world trading. So the way they finally did it was by making it to where the only things that you could trade in RuneScape, you had to have like an equal trade on it. It was a whole thing, man. And they got rid of the wilderness too, because it was a whole other thing. Because there are a lot of like gold trade happens by going to the wilderness with the items on them, and then you kill that person and they drop all the items, and then you take those items, and it's like a legit way of getting money, but actually you bought those items and it's someone doing it.
Chargebacks coming from Jagex's site.
Don't ask me how I know.
Credit card companies weren't happy about it. If Jagex didn't fix it, even though it wasn't even really their fault, credit card companies would stop working with them.
Yeah.
So Jagex would need to make some big changes to prevent real-world trading. The first step was on November 20th, 2007. Jagex would adjust the duel arena to have a cap on how much you could win. Players were now limited to a maximum gain of 3,000 GP every 15 minutes.
I don't really want this.
At best, you could win 12,000 GP an hour at the duel arena. Seeing as how much of a key part rares played in the duel arena, they would decline in the following days.
Yep.
But this update wasn't enough to curb real-world trading, so the following week, Jagex would take another drastic measure. On the 26th of November, the Grand Exchange was released, a trading system where you could buy and sell just about every tradable item in the game. Previously, all trades were done player to player. This new system was more convenient, limited the ability for players to manipulate prices, and reduced scamming by a lot. Most players loved this update, but Jagex would upset them just a week later when trade restrictions were put in place to try and further curb real-world trading. These restrictions made it impossible to trade any item of value unless the player you were trading with also traded you an item of equal or similar value. These values were decided by the Grand Exchange prices of items that Jagex had set when it launched. This was really annoying. You could no longer give your friends gifts or borrow a buddy's gear for a Slayer task, but at least now you could buy a party hat on the Grand Exchange without fear of getting merged or scammed, right? Well,
yeah, a lot of people blame evolution of combat as the reason that this game died, and I think that that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I've probably talked about this a billion times on this channel at this point, but like this is the thing that actually made people not like this game anymore and made people start logging off. Restricting trade really changed the whole meta of this game completely, and like it created this world where you no longer had this community that had been driven the whole time, right? Like everybody had existed on sitting in banks and typing above their heads and scamming new players. That's what was going on for decades in this game. Decade. Almost 10 years. And they got rid of it. And it became a game that people, this is like the thing that I think separated RuneScape 3 from old school RuneScape, is like the desire for the game to stay the way it has been is so strong for RuneScape players. And the changes that they started making started here. Like, this was dramatically different than what had happened previously. This was dramatically different than the way the game played. Not to mention they got rid of PKing in the wilderness, which is like a whole section of the player base's reason for logging into this game. It just was so player hostile and like really showed that they just at that time were not sharing the vision that the players had for the game. And that like turned off so many people. Evolution of Combat did a whole other thing, but this was just totally different.
Yes, but actually no. Jagex messed up and party hats were actually impossible to buy or sell on the Grand Exchange.
It's a good game.
This is where things get weird. Jagex had set the prices of party hats too high when the Grand Exchange launched. The launch of the Grand Exchange and removal of free trade made them crash much harder than Jagex expected. As a result, the price for a blue party hat on the Grand Exchange was way higher than what players actually valued it at. The Grand Exchange listed a blue party hat at 380 million gold, but in players' minds, it was only really worth about 200. Now, that might not seem like much of a problem if you know how the Grand Exchange works today. If it's worth 200 mil, even if the price says 380, put in an offer for 200, and if someone is selling at that price, it should buy anyway, right? The listed price would, over time, correct down to its actual value of 200 mil. Well, things were worked differently in 2007. So Jagex's blue party hat set to 380 mil, right? If you put in an offer of 200 mil, your offer would never actually complete, because all offers back then had to be within 5% of the item's current grand exchange price. 200 mil would be way too low of an offer, even if that's what the player base felt the item should be priced at. So if everyone values the blue party hat at 200 mil and Jagex says no, it's 380, then what happens? Well, nobody can buy and sell them on the grand exchange. Players would go back to the old-fashioned way of trading, player to player. Because of the trade restrictions, they would now have to pad their trades with junk items. These are items that the Grand Exchange valued highly, but were actually fairly useless. So, to buy a blue party hat, you'd give the seller 200 million gold and 180 million gold worth of junk. If this sounds like a terrible system,
This is like... It's so odd, because RuneScape is a game that people are well known to play that suffer through nonsense, right? But it is a really good example of how that if you make your game not fun to play, people will stop playing it. And RuneScape suffered so much for so long because of this. Now, I didn't stick around through all this time, so I don't really have like a very clear idea of what it was like to be a RuneScape player at this time. But I know that it went from being a game that everyone that I knew played to a game that everyone I knew used to play very quickly. And like logging in and seeing all of this, instead of just being able to go and buy, say, like a granite maul for 50K from a guy who just has a bunch of them laying around and doesn't care about it and is just willing to help out someone who's like lower level. So like going in and seeing that you need the full 150K and them trying to explain to you to like offer a whole bunch of junk items. You're like, I don't even know what any of this. I'm 12, bro. Like I have no idea what's going on here. It's just such a... It was such just an absolute smack in the face.
It's because it is, but it was the player's only option. Imagine you pull up to a Ferrari dealership, hand the dealer a check for 200K, and then you have your buddy in a U-Haul dump 300 pounds of Beanie Babies on their lot. In this world, the dealer would happily shake your hand, hand you the keys, and you'd be on your way. Party hats had become a pretty unappealing item. Getting enough junk to be able to buy one was a huge task, especially when you needed so much of it. They were even considered untradeable for a while because of this. Owners were more or less stuck with this unsellable, useless paper crown.
Wild,
although it wasn't all bad times for them. In July of 2008, Jagex introduced the lending feature. You could temporarily lend an item to another player for up to 72 hours with no risk of being scammed. When time was up, the item would return to your account. Around this time, rare item owners would make decent money lending out their items for a small fee. I personally remember paying a couple 100K to borrow a Santa hat back then for about 4 hours. Good use of money? No, but I sure looked cool in that RuneScape music video that I never finished making. As a result of nobody using the GE to trade party hats, their prices would stay exactly the same for months. For nearly a year, the blue party hat was listed at 380 million gold on the Grand Exchange. In September of 2008, Jagex decided it was finally time to fix their pricing. On September 29th, they would adjust the Grand Exchange and party hats would slowly start moving downwards closer to their street price. But how would they actually start moving in the first place? This part is just a theory, but I think if nobody bought or sold a party hat on that day using the GE, their prices would be lowered by 1%. This would happen until players would begin using the Grand Exchange to trade them again. Throughout the rest of 2008 and early 2009, party hat Grand Exchange prices would slowly sink until they met the street prices in value. In July, the blue party hat would bottom out at 300 million gold and begin to slowly rise again. It would do this all the way.
RuneScape 2 was such an interesting place to be. Like, you go back and you look at this, in my brain, RuneScape 2 went straight from being old school RuneScape looking to looking like RuneScape 3 nowadays. But RuneScape 2 looked like this for a while. And in fact, there's still what's it called? Like HDOS, I think, is the client that you can use to play the game in a way that looks like this still, which is such an odd thing to see because this is so not the way RuneScape ever looked to me. Like, this is definitely when I was sort of falling out of it for sure. Like, seeing fires that are transparent is such an odd thing. But like, it really does feel like a thing that didn't happen sometimes when you look back, definitely.
Way until February of 2011, where it would reach a whopping 700 million gold. An insane number, but things were about to get even crazier. Jagex announced that the trade restrictions were going to be lifted. Along with this, they would make some massive changes to the Grand Exchange. The item price that showed when you went to buy or sell an item would now just be Jagex's suggested price. Players could buy and sell their items for whatever price they wanted without worrying that their offer would be inactive.
As God
Even if
intended
Jagex
it.
suggested an item was worth 100 coins, you could sell it for 500, so long as someone was willing to pay that much for it. All of a sudden, they'd absolutely explode in price faster than ever before. Before the end of the year, the Blue Party Hat reached an insane price of 2.147 billion gold, the maximum amount of gold that you could hold at a time. This was really exciting, but would also cause a big problem for players looking to buy or sell one, which I'll cover in depth in a moment. For now, Jagex would ignore this problem and do something crazy. They had mentioned in the past that they had no plans to introduce more discontinued tradable rare items into the game due to the headache it caused both developers and players. But Jagex back then wasn't exactly known for keeping their promises. For the first time in nearly a decade, they would begin releasing new limited time rare items. The first of which was the fish mask. Remember this thing? No? Yeah, I don't blame you, it's hideous. Now, I'm not really sure why they would release a discontinued rare item after all this time. Oh, it could only be obtained from the Squeal of Fortune, their new microtransaction-based minigame. They would also release...
How do you guys feel about the concept that, like, Jagex has been bought and sold so many times that the people who are in charge of it now, like, really have a weird stranglehold on, like, what's actually going on. Like, the player base sort of decides what's happening, and the people are trying to sell to the player base, but it doesn't have this same sort of thought process defining the way that it's going to move forward. Like, Andrew Gower's ideas for what RuneScape should be and how the game should play were what defined the game to be a thing that we all enjoyed. And nowadays, RuneScape is marketed to us, by us. Like, the things we want out of RuneScape are endlessly sort of repackaged and sold to us in some kind of way. Like, I'm a pretty big believer that people don't actually really know what they want very well, that it takes somebody who can look ahead and see what people are going to want and have a better idea, because, like, the masses kind of have this, like, half vision because they have to live the life, and they sort of are, like, obscured by the way that they sort of want the game to feel, or they think they want the game to feel. You know what I'm saying? Like, I worry about the vision behind RuneScape sometimes, and I worry about the vision behind all games as like the monetary value of these things drops because the player base drops. Like, the way that they have to try to make the game to addict you is problematic, but not necessarily fun. It's just a very obscure sort of gray area. Like, when people start looking at video games as a business investment, which I get that they are, it just takes away some of the desire to make the game good. It's very complicated.
Released the Black Santa hat in 2013, maybe to try and lure people back to the game after a certain update, but it was too late. Most players who loved the now very nostalgic holiday items were on the newly released old school RuneScape, where these items were basically worthless.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody who's only played old school RuneScape and never played the original RuneScape, and you're like, why is he making a big deal about these? They're worth like 3K. That's why. If you want to know why they're so worthless and old school, I'll link the video I made about that at the end. Now, why was the Blue Party Hat reaching max cash such an issue? Well, first of all, it could no longer be traded on the Grand Exchange. It's impossible to buy or sell an item for more than the max cash limit, so players would return to the old way of doing business once again, player-to-player trades. They would use an item called Spirit Shards as currency. Spirit Shards can be bought and sold for 25 GP each from an NPC, making it a really solid store of value. They'll always be worth 25 GP each. If you were holding a max stack of shards, you were technically holding 53 billion gold. Problem solved. Except leaving the cozy convenience of the Grand Exchange led to an old problem coming back. Price manipulation would return in full swing. Rich players could once again hoard the stock and set prices at whatever level they wanted much more easily. By 2015, Christmas crackers and every—
Well, I think the thing that I'm trying to get at is that, like, we live in a weird world nowadays where video games last for such an unbelievably long time and they're constantly updated and given new content consistently. But in the old days, when these games were originally made, there wasn't a player base telling the developers what they wanted. The developers had to have an idea of what they thought would be a good game, and they had to make that game. Like, you know, Doom, RuneScape, we mentioned San Andreas Knights of the Old Republic. Like, these games were developed completely in a vacuum. And yeah, they had playtesters, but they didn't have this giant crowd of people trying to control like what they were going to be in the long term. And a lot of times I feel like player bases sort of tend to shoot themselves in the foot. Like, I feel like World of Warcraft is in the state that it's in because the player base couldn't get on the right page or the same page about what they actually wanted from the game. So in order to market to those people, you know, it created all of these issues like the WoW token and all these kinds of things because they thought it's what the player base wanted. And a large portion of the player base probably does actually want that. But the player base doesn't know that, like, getting that thing would have ruined the experience that they were having, you know, that, like, all of this new content and these seasonal raids coming out and all these things happening would, like, devalue their experience in the game long term, but it kept people coming back to the game and thus increased the profit margins of the video game. But, like, back in the day, dude, like, someone just had to have a really good idea of how to make something that was really fun in order to make a game that was a market success.
Other party hat had passed max cash too. Jagex knew this was a problem, but for now they couldn't do anything. The max cash stack was a technical limitation that would need some major changes to the game in order to increase. So for now, they did nothing, and as you probably expected, street prices of party hats would climb higher and higher than ever before. In the meantime, in 2021, Jagex would release a new party hat to celebrate RuneScape's 20th year anniversary, the Golden Party Hat. This would be a limited time item, and like the other party hats, would never release again and is tradable. Overall, the player base's reaction to this was relatively positive, and it seemed to bring back a number of old players hoping to snag this soon-to-be discontinued item. Over the next few years, they would go crazy with limited time rare items. They would also release the green Santa hat the same year and the purple Halloween mask in 2022. Although, unlike the Golden Party Hat, Jagex has mentioned that the green Santa could return at a later date and made no mention of if the purple Halloween mask was discontinued or not. I'm not going to start tracking the prices of these in this video because it's really the same story for all of them. They would start out at really high prices and then crash significantly because, well, none of them are really all that rare right now. And honestly, with how many people are hoarding them, they might never be. Now, as for the original holiday items, around this time, the Christmas cracker would take back its rank 1 spot and surpass the blue party hat. If I had to guess, this happened because there are so few that are left unopened. But both of these items had become so valuable that they couldn't be bought with spirit shards alone anymore. So lower valued rares would become another type of currency. You would use the rares to buy the rares. Prices had gotten so high that for the average player, no matter how hard they grinded or how many bosses they killed, they would never be able to afford a party hat. Jagex realized this, and on a live stream about the game's economy, said that party hats had really just become a mercher's playground. They were right. Earlier that year, merchants were shortly able to manipulate the blue party hat street price to 302.5 billion gold. Let's say you wanted to buy one using real money without getting banned. In 2013, Jagex introduced bonds, items which you could buy with real money and then redeem for membership or sell to other players on the Grand Exchange for GP. At the time, bonds were $6.99 USD and sold for 49.
I find this to be such a strange thing in MMORPGs. This concept of, I have been playing for a year and a half, this person has been playing for 18 years, I should be able to catch up to them. I fundamentally disagree with this concept, but the way that they go about policing it in a lot of games, I also disagree with. Like, I believe that you should always have some kind of identifiable way of being further along than people who have put less time into the game than you have. Like, nobody who is here for a year and a half should have the upper hand on you if you've been here for 18 years. They just shouldn't. Like, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why that's such a controversial thing to say a lot of times, but it just, like, it's the same thing with people who are like 20 years old and are angry at somebody who has like a nice job and a house. It's like, they're 45, dude. They've like done a lot of stuff. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it's just like the way that it works. Like, it's not even a seniority system. It's like you should have earned more over that time. Like, if you should have learned more, you should know how things work better. You should like have a better hold of the game. You should have like accumulated more stuff. Like, that's the way that it should be. Like, you should just be better in the game because you've been playing for longer. Like, I get that someone can show up who can build skills faster than you ever could, and they could surpass you, but it should be really difficult to do. It should not be a given that if you just like log in, that there's catch-up mechanics to get you caught up to people who are like 18 years ahead of you. I think MapleStory does a really good job with this. Like, MapleStory, as far as like, see you later, Bob. Be safe out there, man. Thank you for watching. MapleStory does like a really good job of like making grinds excruciatingly long. Like, the level cap increased in MapleStory 4 years ago, and it took 4 years for someone to get to that level cap. And I think that's a really cool way of doing it because it creates a point in the game to where it's really difficult for you to actually like surpass somebody else. You can do it. You can catch up to them, but you're gonna have to really like dig in and go for it.
9.8 million GP each. In total, to buy a blue party hat using only bonds at its peak, you'd be spending about $42,500. Jagex knew that it was finally time to tackle the max cash problem. On June 12, 2023, Jagex would increase the maximum number of coins that could be traded on the Grand Exchange from 2.147 billion to 2.147 quintillion. All of a sudden, party hats and crackers could be traded on the Grand Exchange again, and their actual prices would fall hard. In a few weeks, they would all lose 10 to 20% of their value, mainly because they were that overvalued by merchants who had manipulated their prices. In the following months, they would release more tradable holiday items, like the Black Party Hat, Purple Santa Hat, and Orange Halloween Mask, although their prices would follow a similar trend of the other tradable holiday items from years prior. And that's where we are today. As it stands, the Blue Party Hat is worth a whopping 85 billion gold, or $6,000 in today's bond prices, and is in good company with the other original party hats. Although prices have stagnated a bit since being able to be traded on the Grand Exchange again, they'll seemingly go nowhere but up long term, as long as RuneScape 3 has players who want them, and inflation continues. Check out the video on the right to find out how Old School's party hats went from expensive coveted items to basically worthless. Thanks for
Well, it's a good video. Colin Elliott always does a really good job. If you guys haven't liked and subscribed to his channel, like, you definitely should. He definitely always does a really good job. It was a good video. I don't know. Like, you know, there's a whole bunch of like weird things about this. You know, I think that it sort of brings up a lot of thoughts of the concept of like, you know, what actually is valuable about the things that we do in life, and how do we sort of maintain that value over a long time. I think this is a struggle that long-lasting online games sort of, you know, we'll always have to deal with. But I don't know, man. It's really difficult to sort of place what you're supposed to do mechanically in order to fix this and to stop these sort of things from like becoming worthless, but also not becoming so valuable that basically no one can ever hope to afford one. I think that you should be able to do things, but I think that like MMOs by nature sort of should have this feeling of like the earlier you start playing, the better. But I don't know.